dared to stare, unveiling the shadows of fear on fear files.
A young man, let's call him Jack, became consumed by the belief that his neighbor was the devil incarnate. But what started as a harmless suspicion soon spiraled into a chilling plan for murder. Jack had always been a little eccentric, a bit of a loner who kept to himself. But when an elderly man moved into the apartment opposite his, something inside Jack snapped. He became convinced that the old man was the embodiment of evil, that he was plotting something sinister behind closed doors. At first, Jack tried to brush off his suspicions as paranoia, but the more he watched the old man, the more convinced he became. He would spend hours peering through his window, studying every move the old man made, searching for any sign of his true nature. But as Jack's obsession grew, so did his fear. He started to believe that the old man was watching him too, that he knew what Jack was thinking, what he was planning. And that's when Jack made a fateful decision. He convinced himself that the only way to rid the world of this supposed evil was to kill the old man. It was a chilling realization. Jack was convinced it was the right thing to do. He started planning meticulously, plotting every detail of the murder in his mind. But as the days turned into weeks, Jack's mental state began to deteriorate. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything else but his twisted obsession. He started seeing things, hearing voices in his head urging him to carry out his plan. And then, one fateful night, Jack finally snapped. He armed himself with a knife and broke into the old man's apartment, ready to carry out his gruesome deed. But as he stood over the old man's bed, knife in hand, something inside him hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, the old man's eyes snapped open, fixing Jack with a gaze that sent shivers down his spine. It was like the old man could see into Jack's soul, could see the darkness that consumed him. And then, to Jack's horror, the old man spoke. He didn't sound like the devil incarnate. He sounded like a frightened old man pleading for his life. And in that moment, Jack realized the truth. The real evil was inside him all along. He dropped the knife and fled from the apartment, consumed by guilt and shame. But even as he ran, he couldn't escape the darkness that lurked within him. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes the true horror lies not in the monsters we see, but in the demons we carry inside ourselves. A small-town cop, let's call him Tom, who found himself consumed by a cold case from decades ago. But little did he know, reopening the case would unearth secrets darker than he could have ever imagined. So back in 1978, 3 young girls went missing after school in Tom's small town. Their names were Emily, Sarah, and Jessica, and their disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. Despite an exhaustive search, no trace of them was ever found, and the case went cold. But for Tom, the case never left him. It lingered in the back of his mind, a constant reminder of the girls who had vanished without a trace. He spent years poring over the evidence, searching for any clue that might lead to their whereabouts. And then, one day in 2008, history seemed to repeat itself. 3 girls with the same names as the ones who had gone missing in 1978 disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. It was like a nightmare come to life, a chilling echo of the past that sent shivers down Tom's spine. The case was reopened, and Tom threw himself into it with a renewed sense of purpose. He interviewed witnesses, combed through old files, and followed up on every lead, determined to bring closure to the families who had waited for answers for so long. But as he delved deeper into the investigation, Tom began to realize that there was more to the case than met the eye. There were secrets buried beneath the surface, secrets that someone was desperate to keep hidden. He uncovered evidence of corruption and cover-ups, of people in positions of power who had turned a blind eye to the disappearances all those years ago. It was a shocking revelation that rocked the foundation of the small town, exposing the dark underbelly that lurked beneath its idyllic facade. But even as Tom closed in on the truth, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was like someone was following his every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Tom realized that he was in more danger than he had ever imagined. In the end, Tom's relentless pursuit of justice would come at a cost. He would uncover the truth behind the disappearances, but at the expense of his own safety and sanity. It was a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, that the past has a way of coming back to haunt us when we least expect it. John found himself trapped in a nightmare straight out of a horror movie. But little did he know, the terror he would face was all too real. John was just minding his own business, enjoying a quiet night in his apartment, when suddenly he heard a knock at the door. Thinking it was just a neighbor or a delivery person, he opened the door without a second thought. But instead of a friendly face, he was greeted by a group of masked men, their eyes gleaming with malice. Before he could react, they grabbed him and dragged him out of his apartment, throwing him into the back of a van and speeding off into the night. As John's heart pounded in his chest, he realized he was in serious trouble. He had no idea who these people were or why they had taken him, but he knew it couldn't be good. And then, just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, they arrived at their destination. A large private estate shrouded in darkness. The masked men dragged John out of the van and onto the estate, where he was met by a man who seemed to be in charge. The man explained that John was now their prey, and that he had 5 minutes to run before they unleashed their hunters. John's mind raced with fear as he tried to comprehend what was happening. He was being hunted like an animal, with nowhere to run and no one to turn to for help. It was like something out of a nightmare, a twisted game of life and death with him as the unwilling participant. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, John took off into the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest as he ran for his life. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of his pursuers, their footsteps echoing through the night like a death knell. But even as John ran, he knew that escape was futile. The estate was vast, with endless acres of land for his hunters to search. He was outnumbered and outmatched, with no hope of survival against the armed men who were closing in on him. In those moments of terror, John realized that he was truly alone, that no one was coming to save him. He had been thrown into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions, with no way out and no end in sight. And as the hunters closed in on their prey, John knew that his fate was sealed. He was nothing more than a pawn in their twisted game, a sacrifice to satisfy their bloodlust. It was a night of terror that would haunt John for the rest of his days, a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the hearts of men. And as he faced his final moments, he knew that he would never forget the horror of being hunted like an animal on that private estate in the dead of night. Thank you for braving the unknown with us. Until next time, stay haunted.